Go for however long, doesn't make a difference. Then I normally do like an after show for 2 or 3 hours. Just hang
Oh,
out
fun.
in Discord and talk with my audience. They ask questions and stuff.
And this is live. Yeah.
Yep. We are
Cool.
live. We are
Sounds
live.
fun.
Yes, we are live. It looks like we are live. Awesome. So Preston, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Well, hey, thanks for reaching out. And again, I say this publicly, but I like your chair. It looks way more comfy than mine. Okay, so a little bit about myself. Um, I I had a major crisis in faith. I know people say that they had a crisis in faith, but I did consider myself to not even be a Christian for a time, and then had a lot of questions. Then changed my mind on that from atheism to being theistic, and then just kind of walked through this process. Years after that, I started what's called the Doubters Club, and this was a few years, well, about 6 years ago now, and it's in Denver, Colorado, is where we started it. And the whole goal was, I had a lot of friends who thought different than me, atheist, agnostic, Satanists, they just thought different, and we would get together and we would say, "What do you want to talk about?" And we would have a list of rules, and we just say, "What do you want to talk about next time?" And next time and next time. And so we start getting together. Well, what we found out was, it's really fun when you're being friends with people who don't think like you, and you don't have ulterior motives. It's imagine that. It's like super fun. And so our thing was, let's model friendship to our friends through the Doubters Club and to our community, and let's pursue truth together. And I know, truth, just even that word feels like a loaded word, but we really don't mean it that way. We just mean if there's something to be said about this that is true, even if I'm wrong, and I'll admit I've been wrong plenty of times, I would want to know. And let's do it in a friendly way. So that's kind of like a very quick overview. My life, it was a journey like that through discussions, but I don't expect people are going to land where I've landed. But I do expect friendship's going to make our lives a lot better. So the Doubters Clubs have multiplied around the world now, and every time we do trainings, we'll have people, Christian, non-Christian, doesn't matter. They'll go through the training and they'll launch a club. And we had a book recently come out called The Doubters Club. If for people that if it's going to be a lifestyle, we want it to be a lifestyle. So you don't have to have all this anxiety and tension around the Thanksgiving table every time. You can just live in a way that you're at peace with yourself and others. So, yeah, that's feel free to dig in anywhere in that story that you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really admirable that we are trying to build more communities where it's about open dialogue and disagreement without yelling and screaming at each other, and learning how to have those kinds of conversations without demonizing the other group, I think is a very important skill that we're missing in society today. So I think that I really like the idea of the Doubters Club a lot, and that's kind of why I invited you on, to have a friendly disagreement between a theist and an atheist,
Yes.
to show how it's done, pretty much. So just to give my
Great.
intro, I'm an atheist, by which I mean I believe that everything in the world seems to be best explained by naturalism without a god. Could you tell me, you're a theist, I'm assuming. Could you tell me a little bit about your position?
Yeah. So I'm a Christian, but well, I would say this. I'm starting to change some vocabulary because I'm realizing we're using the same vocabulary but different dictionary. Not just you and I, just people in general. So I would say this. I am a Jesus follower, so I believe in a Jesus-looking God. Okay, so that would be my position. I wouldn't consider myself an evangelical Christian and those sort of things. So yeah, that would be my position, and obviously I differ from you on probably a whole lot when it comes to everything from origins of the universe to where we end up when we die. But that's what I think. I think those are bridges, not barriers, to friendship and conversation. So yeah, that'd be my position.
Awesome. So you mentioned origins. Like, my position is, it seems like the best explanation of the origin seems to be like the quantum field theory, that
Okay.
I believe our universe had a beginning, but its origin was some pre-existing natural thing. Um, why would you why would you think that a god would be a better explanation than the physics explanations right now?
That's a great question. Um, so I think when I think of the origin of the universe, I don't think that there's a home run argument, no matter which way that I've looked. Okay, and so what I'm after is not certainty. I'm after confidence, And then there's going to be a lot of questions I have around the origin. So not just can it explain that things got started, but can it explain how things are the way that they are currently? Okay, so for me, that's going to be an issue as well. So I go from, and you even said, if I'm ever putting words in your mouth, let me know. It's not my intention, but what I heard you say is there was some, like, we had to start. Okay, there was some beginning to our universe. Okay, our galaxy, those sort of things. What I believe is to create time, material, space. Uh, Whatever did that has to be outside of time, material, space. Like it just has to be naturally. And then, so then my question is, okay, so if there was a beginning, was the beginning caused or not caused? Was it intentional or not intentional? Was it a being or not a being? And then was that being personal or not personal? Okay, so for me, those are some steps that I walk through. Again, when I get into the origin story, I just want to be very clear here, because I think that it's probably worth clarifying multiple times. I'm not after certainty, because I haven't run into a home run argument on any side, and I'd be willing to admit, hey, even the Christian worldview around the origin story, Genesis 1, is not a science. That's not a passage on science. The Bible's not a science book. That is, for all intents and purposes, a poem. So, and it rivals many poems like itself that predated even the writing of Genesis. So I understand all that. What I think is happening in those sort of accounts is people are trying to go, how do we explain where, when, why, how do we explain how it got started and how it is the way that it is now? So then obviously I would get into, what do we see around the world? Morality, questions of morality, all that stuff would help me clarify what is the point of origin for us. So that's where I would come from. So I really do go, I think it was created. I think there's a point in which it started. I think that started from a being. Okay. And
Just
people are
to
like,
start to
aliens.
jump in, what do you mean
Yeah.
by being?
Yeah. Immaterial, outside of time, space, continuum. Okay. Because that's when I would say it all got started. Okay. That's when, so a being, something started this. And then my question is that something personal or impersonal? Right.
Yeah, for
Which
sure.
which I wonder if that's where, when you talk about the origin of the universe, are you saying, okay, it got started, how did it get started? Through natural causes. Would you say being or something started it, or you say, no, I'm just gonna say natural causes?
Well, thank you for the super chat, Jacob. He says, just cuz, thanks for the content, appreciate it. So in philosophy, I understand the word being just mean anything that exists. So any existing object would be a
Correct.
being. And so I think that
Correct.
obviously that there would be a being who created the universe for sure. And I think that the way to phrase it would be is, I think our universe had a beginning, not all natural things. I don't think all natural things had a beginning. I think our universe had a beginning. So I agree with you that space, time, and matter, or space and time at least, had a beginning at the Big Bang. But space and time is a single kind of a field. I think the consensus in physics right now is that space and time are emergent. They come about from more fundamental physical things, that different fields that existed prior to space-time. And so I would agree with you that our universe and our space-time had a beginning at the Big Bang, but I think that they were created by something that was non-conscious, doesn't have intentionality, just another unguided natural force of the universe. Why would you prefer a intentional being, I think is the word you used, over a unguided natural forces?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say I prefer. That's an interesting way of putting it. But I would say, when we're talking about being, okay, so if those space and time emerge from, what did you say? Unconscious natural causes. Is that what you?
Yep, unguided natural forces,
Yeah.
unconscious, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So again, what I'm getting into at this point is, okay, now how do we explain certain things about the way things currently are? Okay. So the way things currently are, I find all throughout history, and some of this, I know that people, if people are watching this and they're used to some apologetic arguments, and they're like, oh, he's just quoting that apologetic argument, I would just encourage them, I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to present a case. I'm trying to have a discussion. Okay. So if you're asking me what's convincing, I do look back and I go, okay, it feels like, because neither of us were there at the Big Bang. I think it was a Big Bang. I think it was very similar to that. It for for the evolution of things to arrive to where they are today. I understand it can happen over however many years, but I'm just saying for it to arrive to the way it is today, all throughout human history, we have these universal longings. And again, that's why I'd say when I talk origin, I'm not just saying where we came from or how things came to exist, but why they exist the way they do now. So we have universal longings, longing for, we're thirsty, we're hungry, longing for sexual intimacy. It feels like everything that there's a universal longing for, there's something to satisfy it. Now, in Doubters Clubs, we've talked about this. People said, "Well, what if you want a unicorn to exist?" That's not a universal longing. Okay, so my kids, I have two daughters. They would love dragons and unicorns to exist. They're going to grow out of that. So, but I'm just saying, universal longing for this personal being, power behind the sun, what have you. And I'm going, that's really fascinating to me. Is that an indication that there is something to satisfy that universal longing? Because I just see that to be true in all other areas of humanity. That would be one of the other things. So whenever you say, if I have a preference, I'd say, I don't know if I have a preference for there to be a personal being. I think that maybe I start leaning that way when I start thinking, okay, what has history looked like over everything that we know? So that'd be one indication for me. The other one would be, I do ask myself, okay, if there was a cause, was it impersonal or personal? And what gives the greatest account for the way that the universe is structured right now? And for me, I've arrived at a place that's personal. So, and I guess I would ask you the same question. It would be great to hear from you, not just to stop with my explanation, but what for you makes you lean or has made you lean that direction to say, hey, you know what? It's not personal. It's natural forces.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify, by prefer, I didn't mean like, I just like this better. I do mean like,
Sure,
what is the better explanation kind of a thing. Like, I like potatoes better, therefore potatoes created the universe. But so my position is, I think that it's more likely unguided natural forces because all of the conscious, intentional agents we see are a product of physical forces. So it's like all of the pineapples we see are a result of pineapple trees. So it's I don't think that we could say that a pineapple tree came about from a pineapple, because clearly it seems to be the other way around. So I'd say that it's more likely, seems to me, that the origin of the universe came about by like a quantum field or something, because all of the evidence seems to indicate that intentionality and minds are an emergent property that comes about from physical forces, not the other way around. And so when we look at the evidence of physics, the most fundamental thing we see is quantum fields. Those are the things that make up everything else. So it seems to me that that's a more plausible candidate explanation for what the most fundamental thing in the universe is that created the universe, rather than a mind. It seems a mind is like anthropocentric kind of a thing, where we're saying we're minds, we can imagine it being a mind. It makes a lot of intuitive sense to us to be a mind, but I don't see a lot of evidence to support that. It seems to be more like an intuition. Like you mentioned, our universal longings. I wouldn't agree with you that I think all of our universal longings have something to fulfill it. I mean, obviously, because I think we evolved, I think that our longings correspond to something that would benefit survival in some way, but I don't think they're true. I don't think that they necessarily need to correspond to reality. Also, I don't know if I'd say that there are universal longings in that way, like especially not for God, because I know there's many societies who never had religious beliefs. Like the Paraha, I think, is a modern one that never had any God beliefs. But I wouldn't necessarily say that. I wouldn't think that's a universal belief. I would think that like hunger and sex things are pretty universal, but even for those, there are conditions where you don't feel those things. So I don't know if I'd say there's anything like a universal longing. For me, it seems more just like we have evolutionary biases that cause us to want to do certain things that happen to be beneficial to survival, regardless of whether or not they're true. So, for example, type 1 and type 2 fallacies are, if you hear a rustle in the bushes, humans have a tendency to think, oh, it's a lion, or it's an agent of some kind, a hyperactive agency detection system. Because thousands of years ago, if you thought it was, like, I'll just be the super skeptic, be like, I don't know, it might be a lion, it might just be the wind, I'm going to wait for more information. Well, when the more information comes, it eats you. So normally you want to like just assume lion and run away, you survive a lot more. And so the tendency for humans is to prioritize agency, to see agency in everything, even when it's not there. So we used to think gods caused lightning and tornadoes and hurricanes, all kinds of things, because our minds are designed by evolution to think that there's agency in things even when there's not. So to me, that seems to be a more plausible explanation of why we have a belief in a God, rather than the fact that we have universal longings that there's something to fulfill. It seems more likely that we have these desires because we've been evolutionarily designed to feel them because it was beneficial to survival, which is why we think like there's a monster under the bed, or after we watch a scary movie, in the dark corner, there might be an alien in the dark corner. It seems like that is a more reasonable explanation to why we have this longing and desire for a being of some kind, to me, rather than it actually being there. And I think that the better explanation of the origin of the universe is like the laws of physics and the quantum fields, because all consciousnesses seem to be a result of those, not the other way around.
So yeah, there's a few interesting things. I should probably be writing down notes as you're talking, because if that is what we do at Doubters Club, by the way. I usually have a notepad, and then we just go, hey, let me ask you this.
Yeah, I do too. I got my little my word thing open. I'm typing down when you're like talking. So.
Oh, not fair. You didn't warn me. Okay, so a few things. One, in the pineapple tree illustration, okay, which is helpful. When you said, we know that when a pineapple comes from a pineapple tree, I would take it a step further and get a little broader and go, okay, then, and what about the atmosphere and the environment have allowed that pineapple tree to thrive? So we're not going, okay, the pineapple, we're not saying the tree came from the pineapple, of course. I'm just saying if we keep going backwards, we're saying there were things within the environment that allowed that pineapple tree to grow. So if we're talking evolution, I'm going, hey, I don't have an issue with, I do have an issue with young earth creationists. Okay, so in within
what, you don't
circles,
think the world is 6,000 years old? No.
No, I don't. But don't tell anyone, except the people listening to this. But I do have an issue with that. I don't have an issue when people go, you go back as far as you want to go back. And I think we should keep going back as far as science will take us back. Here's what I'd say though. I think it is fascinating, even with your illustration, that there's an environment that's allowing that tree to take place. I think that is fascinating. I think that's continued with the origin of the universe. There's an environment by which it's allowing this to take place, the evolutionary process. Growing to get better, not just to get worse, and we can jump into that if you want to talk about different views on evolution. But then even when we're talking consciousness, so we're talking about a being that, well, I'm talking about a being that I would say has consciousness. You're talking about natural forces that have no consciousness. They're just natural forces, correct?
Yep.
Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. So when I'm talking about consciousness, even the consciousness that we have right now, the immaterial thoughts, the thing, you can't weigh your thoughts. And I know there's been lots of experiments. Where's the soul or the spirit? And you probably don't believe in the soul or spirit, but even thoughts in and of themselves. And Sam Harris has done a lot of work on this. And I find it fascinating when you go, okay, there's some immaterial things at play here. If there's immaterial, and you and I would probably disagree that immaterial exists, maybe. But if there's immaterial at play, the unweighable, that it's not matter, okay, I would put things like love within, aside from the emotion, the force of love, I would put these things in that camp. When we talk about that, I'm going, if immaterial exists, then, okay, then it is very plausible that we would have a God, an immaterial realm. That's what I think Christians historically speak of the heavens in that way. Okay, so I think that's an interesting thought. When I talk about the origin of the universe, I don't know if I found one origin account to be more persuasive than any other for me personally. I think that even as we're talking this through, I'm like, what's giving the best explanation for what we know, not what we don't know, what we know, and where we are right now. And so again, if we're talking evolution, I think things evolve to be greater. When we're talking about the universal desire, even the things that you had talked about, that you said, this is what I need to write down, but you're talking about the universal desire for hunger, sex, those sort of things. and then you gave a few situational ones. I would say those are situational. I do think there's a case to be made that all throughout the history of humanity, there's been a longing for the divine. I don't actually think that if we're just talking pure biology and from an evolutionary standpoint, that that's hugely beneficial to people. I don't think that that is. I think if anything, it would be so outside of the grasp of reality that they would be. I mean, what does it benefit someone to believe in a higher power when we want control over the seasons and we want control? So I would just say that for me is I still think that there's universal, but I'd love to hear some pushback that you have, and we can jump into any of the things that I would find convincing now too, be it consciousness or morality or the historicity of it. Those would be fascinating too.
Yeah, for sure. So going backwards from, because I wrote it down, you said, what does it benefit someone to believe in a higher power? Well, I think it benefits someone quite a bit, actually. So like there are a number of reasons why that could benefit someone. Thank you for the super chat, John. Don, appreciate it. I think like one of the reasons is like the thing I mentioned earlier, the type 1 and type 2 fallacies. Like if you hear a rustle in the bushes and you think it's a lion and you run away every time, you'll survive every time. But if you hear a rustle in the bushes and you think it's the wind and you don't run away, that group of people will be eaten by the lion more often than the group of people who always runs away. So if you always think it's a lion and you always run away, you will survive more often than a group who thinks it's just the wind. So if you always hear something you don't understand and you think it has agency to it, that will benefit your survival because you'll run away more often. You'll be afraid of it. You'll be more hesitant to interact with it. But if you're more like scientific minded and curious, curiosity killed the cat kind of a thing. You're more likely to get eaten by the lion. And so this hyperactive agency detection system has been hugely beneficial for us evolutionarily because it has kept us alive in a lot of cases. That's the most obvious example. There are many other examples, like how having a common system of values or thinking someone's always watching you will make it more likely that you'll think before doing certain things. You'll be more conscious of actions. Like there are a number of studies in science that show if someone reads the Bible or a book that they think is morally significant before taking a test, they're less likely to cheat on the test. So if you are in a mental space where you think someone is watching you who you respect, you're more likely to act in a way that you think is respectable. And so there are many psychological benefits to having belief in a God or belief in agents outside of yourself that can help people survive, that would give us a lot of reason to think that these are beliefs that are produced by evolution. You mentioned evolution. You think things are evolved to be greater. I don't know if I would agree with that. I think things evolve to fit their environment, but I don't think necessarily greater, because things could, as the environment changes, what is greater also changes. So like dinosaurs ruled the world at one time because they had a much more densely packed oxygenated atmosphere. And so you got a lot bigger, but I don't know if that would be greater or lesser. So I don't think things evolve to be greater. I think things evolve to fit their environment and just happen to be whatever works. We can actually weigh thoughts. Like there are many different calculations of thoughts, because thoughts are energy. So energy, you can convert energy to mass, E equals mc squared. And so you can actually weigh thoughts. There are a number of calculations out there expressing what the estimate of what a thought actually weighs, given our brain size and energy level. You're right. I don't think immaterial exists. I don't think there's anything that's immaterial that exists. I think it's all material, all energy, mass and energy of some kind. I think it's possible there could be immaterial, but I do think even if there's an immaterial, I don't think that would be evidence of a God necessarily, because there's many different cultures who think there is an immaterial that has just a spirit realm that's grounded in some kind of a field, like Buddhist Dharma, where it's just a field of this Dharma stuff, and then people and gods existed within that. So I don't think, even if there wasn't immaterial, I don't think that would necessarily be evidence of a God. And you mentioned the fine-tuning kind of a thing, that even if evolution took place, there's the facts in the universe allow evolution to take place. I think that's an interesting question, but I think that the same question kind of applies to a God. Like, what designed God in such a way that he would want a universe like this one? Because maybe it's possible you could have a God who wanted like a universe of nothing but puppies and unicorns or something, or a universe of nothing but black holes. And so the fact that God has a very particular way his nature is seems to be analogous to the way our universe has a particular nature that way it is. And so if you're going to say that the particular way the universe is demands an explanation, then I would say the same thing applies to God. The particular way God is demands an explanation also. Those would be my initial thoughts on those topics.
Sure. These are great. So I would say, yeah, let me, I have a few questions to ask you for clarification. So on the last point where you're saying that the nature, there's a nature, there would need to be a nature to God because there's a nature to the universe. Explain that a little bit, because in Christianity, obviously, we do believe there's a nature to God and a revelation of God, not that God is just an ambiguous being distant from all creation. I mean, that would be more theistic. But yeah, explain that, why that feels like an objection to you.
Oh yeah, so like one of the main objections that theists bring is that, well, look at the universe, look at all the laws of physics. They're so intricately and fine-tuned. Like
Right.
they have to be specifically organized in this way to produce our universe. And that's true, 100% true. But the same thing applies to a God, because let's say, just like we could change the dials of the gravitational constant, let's say, and then that would push everything farther away and there'd be no planets or particles or whatever. Or if we increase the gravitational constant, everything will collapse into just a ball of black holeness. Just like we can twist the dials of the universe, we could twist the dials on God too. So let's say we change God's desires. Say he doesn't desire a loving relationship with us. He desires unicorns or puppies or black holes or something along those lines. So we can change the way God is in the same way we could change the universe is. We can imagine God to be differently, just like we can imagine the universe to be differently. And so if the very small number of combinations of physics that we have could produce life, or required to produce life, could be changed, then that means that God could also be changed in such a way that he wouldn't produce a universe with life. So for example, each possible way the universe could be, like if we change the gravitational constant, made just black holes, maybe there's a God who wanted that. Or maybe there's a God who wanted only puppies or whatever. And so for each possible way the universe could be, there's a possible God, a way God could be where he could want that universe. And so there's an equal number of ways God could be as the universe could be. And so you have to ask the same question, just like why is God finely tuned in this way to prioritize our kind of a universe as opposed to being a different way? Well, if it's just some kind of inherent property of his nature, well, can't we just say the same thing about the universe?
Okay, give me a second. All right. Great. So what do you say? I ask a few questions about this, and then I would love to hear. I know this, you'll be like, well, that doesn't sound on topic. I would love to hear your, even like a snapshot of your story.
Sure.
Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
do whatever. I'm
And I'm sure
totally open conversation.
Great. Awesome. Well, here's the deal. In Doubters Club, we always ask permission, because there's some times where people are like, you know what, I'd prefer not to. It's like, hey, that's fine, because we're here to not to prove each other wrong, but to build friendship. So here's what's interesting about the way that you keep giving that, like um, the Russell in the bushes illustration. Okay, that instinct of survival. The things that you're sharing are like these instincts and these impulses that are going to help us survive, right? They're I again would push back and say, okay, but the longing for God is not an instinct of survival. I think it's an instinct to be known and loved. It's an instinct um, to be in communion. It's this instinct that what we have here, it just isn't enough. And again, if you want to talk like, okay, well, the instinct for it is an instinct for survival because people want to live forever, right? They don't want to die, and then we're getting into discussions of the afterlife. Well, then I'd go, okay, well, then why is that there? Why is there an instinct to want to live forever? I would just keep going. I think you can keep going backwards, backwards, backwards to say there is a longing there that is outside the realm of just surviving. It's just so I think that for that to be that is true. When we talk about when you talked about what you clarified, the way the universe is would be that God would have to be similar, and there's a bunch of different ways that the universe could be, and there's a bunch of different ways that God could be as well. So there's a lot of thought here, but the Christian thought is that the universe does reveal the nature of God. That would be a pretty thoroughly historically Christian thought. And what would be amazing about that from a theological standpoint is we're going, okay, well, that would give us some indication to, okay, that we have these highly interpersonal beings that interacting with each other like we are right now. We have these needs that are met, yada yada yada. We have morality, right? We have order to creation. And if you say, well, we evolved to that, fine, but we have order right now to creation. What I'd say is that in the Christian tradition would reveal the nature of God. It wouldn't be something that dismisses God because God could have been had any infinite amount of possibilities. It also would say in all the worlds and universes that God could have created, this one was the one that was created that we know of. So there are thoughts out there that, oh, there's a ton of other realities or universes that God's interacting with. I think we can get into that, but what I'm saying is exactly with what you said as an objection is what is an amazing piece of theological information for the Christian or even the theist, just to say in all the worlds that could have existed, this is the one that does exist. And there's a lot of different ways people have interpreted that. For me, I've said, because I believe that the essence of God is love, okay, that, and again, as a Christian, that would be my worldview, and that God being love, that what needed to be created would be this increased ability for free will. And so then you get into free will predestination, but I think for love to exist, free will has to exist. So all these sorts of things. That last bit, listening to you was really insightful and helpful, because I think what you may see as an objection, I look at with a sense of wonder and go, hey, that actually is incredible to me. So yeah, that's what I'd say. That's what I'd say to that. And I know we could go back and forth on things evolving, and I'm saying the atmosphere, the environment evolving to a state to where it is complementing our existence. I'm not saying people evolve to be better and greater and greater. I probably should have clarified, but I'm saying we've evolved. We live in a place right now where we've evolved that we can have, we can participate in the world in such a way that we do. So tell me a little bit about your story, even quickly, like I gave you a snapshot of mine.
Sure. I was brought up Christian, went to a Catholic grade school, Catholic high school. I had major depression my entire life, pretty much, for first 30 or so years. I prayed to God every day, morning and night, never got my prayers answered, so I stopped being able to believe there was an all-loving being sometime in late high school. Didn't know anything about philosophy or atheism until later. Started getting into researching philosophy as a way to try and overcome my depression. Learned about the Four Horsemen. You mentioned Sam Harris, Hitchens, Harris, Dawkins, Dennett, those guys. Started researching into the debates. Found out, oh, this position makes a lot of sense to me. And so I got into that for a while. And so, yeah, mostly that's what led me away from my Christianity. Just cured my major depression recently, within the past year, actually. Due to relationships. Thank you. So very that's cool. Most of my story, I guess. I started a YouTube channel, in case you hadn't noticed. But that's the short version of my story, I think.
It's helpful to know. Do you think that if in your story, if God had answered your prayer, would you have landed at a different place? If you woke up one day, if you prayed one night, you woke up one day and you had no depression, would you have been like, hallelujah, what's it to you? I'm a Christian.
Yeah, definitely. So like, if that's one of the things that even today, like if the thing that would convince me that Jesus or any God was real would be novel testable predictions. That's the standard I use for science and just anything. If you can have a prediction, say, if this belief is true, I will do this experiment and have this result, and it happens, that counts as evidence. So if praying to God actually had demonstrable effects in the future, yeah, that would count as evidence. But even back then I had no understanding of science or epistemology or anything. Anything that had cured my depression, I would have worshipped it for sure. It doesn't matter. Magic 8 Ball cured it, I would have worshipped it.
Oh, well, I've heard Magic 8 Balls have this quite amazing power.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this then. What you said was interesting and something that we do talk about. What would change your mind, if anything would change your mind? And for me as well, by the way, right? I'm not obviously outside the possibility of ever changing my mind. But I would say, when you say that if it was testable, say it again, if it was provable, testable.
Novel testable predictions.
If you had a novel testable prediction, but it would be like prayer-based. Okay? Because that seems to be what we're talking about, even in this example. It's prayer-based. It's not really, so you pray and then it happens, right? You're saying that would be evidence for you that there would be God.
Yeah. So novel testable predictions are anything that allows you to predict the future. So something we don't know yet. So like one of the examples I always use in my debates is if I said there was an invisible man named Bob in my basement and he was magic, and every time I asked Bob for a gold brick, he'd give me a gold brick, and I just asked Bob for 10 gold bricks and 10 gold bricks appeared, that would be evidence of Bob, invisible supernatural man named Bob. So yeah, anything that allows us to predict the future and explain things we don't know about yet is a good hypothesis.
Okay. So all what you see around you and the experiences that we have as human beings, are those predictable and explainable by science, in your opinion?
Yes.
Everything is.
As far as I know.
Yeah. And I think that's where we would differ. And it's probably a perspective of the world too. So I think that for me, look, I know, I mean, we get into the argument of morality if we wanted to, and those sort of things. One of the things that's most unpredictable is human beings. You just cannot predict what they're going to do. You can't even predict their word. So in your example of Bob, if Bob existed, Bob may not want to give you a gold brick one day. And so the fact Bob didn't give you a gold brick doesn't mean Bob doesn't exist. It just means Bob has a will, and that it doesn't have to submit to your will. So I think when you're talking about novel, predictable experiences, that works in the realm of science to some degree. But then you get into, what if you talk about beings? Because even if the proof of my existence is that I do what you say, that's terrible proof of my existence. I have a will. So when I'm talking about God, I'm talking about a free will being. Then of course there's going to be times where, in your example, bricks appear, bricks don't appear. But it's just not, I just don't think it's a good metric, because you're talking about, even with our interactions, if I were to email you 2 minutes before a call and said, hey, actually, I'm not going to be able to make it. Okay, that wouldn't be proof that I don't exist. That would just be, okay, or if I don't show up, if I just don't show up, right? Because I can see someone saying, well, yeah, you emailed. Okay, well, I just don't show up. Well, what I'm just saying is when you have that standard for natural causes, fine. When you have that standard for personal beings, not fine. Does that make sense?
Not exactly. So my position is that novel testable predictions are the foundation for evidence, because what you need for evidence is a way to differentiate imagination from reality. Like if you imagine something exists, you need to show it's not just something in your imagination. You need to show it actually exists in reality. But that only applies to new things. Like if you already have demonstrated evidence of something, like there was a dog. I guess if I told you I saw a dog outside yesterday, you'd be reasonable to believe me, because there's already tons and tons of empirical scientific evidence of dogs. But if I told you I saw a unicorn outside yesterday, you'd be like, no, I need a little bit more than that. I need a little bit more than your testimony on that one. That's where the novel testable predictions come in. If I can say, like, here is this tuft of unicorn fur and you can test its DNA or whatever and you get these results.
Mhm.
That's a good novel testable prediction. Or here you can go see the unicorn yourself. That's a novel testable prediction. It's only when you apply new things that we don't already know about that you need novel prediction. If it's just something we already know about, like you exist or whatever, that's not something that would require novel prediction. So I don't see how exactly that would relate in that sense, because to me it's like, even if Bob stops giving me gold bricks, all of the gold bricks he gave me in the past would still count as evidence. So novel prediction is just saying, if my hypothesis is true, here's something we could expect to see in the future. Like if we die and go to heaven, that's a novel testable prediction. Once we die, I mean, it's not really repeatable. We can only do it once, unfortunately, but that would be evidence too. So novel testable prediction just means, if my hypothesis is true, here's something we would expect to see in the future. And the reason it's important is that you have to show it's not just random chance. Like if it happens at the exact same rate as random chance, then it wouldn't be evidence of your hypothesis. So like if I said Bob's going to make the sun rise tomorrow, well, that's obviously the sun rising tomorrow wouldn't be evidence of Bob, because it's something we already know about that happens. So I think the reason we need to prioritize that is because it has to be higher than random chance. And that applies to humans too. Like you mentioned that you don't think novel predictions would apply to humans, but I think it definitely does. Like we can predict, if there are humans, then we will find houses in the rainforest at a higher rate than if there are not humans. So if we look in rainforests there are no humans, we find no houses. We look in rainforests with humans, there are lots of houses. So we think we can still apply novel predictions to humans too. That's what most of sociology is. So I don't think there would be a problem with that. You just need to find something that you would expect the being does more often than nature does or random chance does.
So I think what I was saying with humans was your Bob gold brick illustration. Not that there aren't things that you would expect to find if there's humans. I mean, I tell my kids the way you could tell if someone moved into a house is there's blinds on the windows, right? So that's because that's what humans do. We don't want people to see us walking around without clothes on. Okay, but I would say what I'm saying is, if you're telling the invisible Bob, hey, give me a gold brick every day, and this day I need 10 gold bricks. If Bob's a personal being, that standard just doesn't apply. So that's what I'm saying about that.
Oh yeah,
I think because
just
you see what I'm saying?
just to clarify. So I mean, I totally agree. The only point of the gold brick thing isn't that he literally needs to give you a gold brick every time or it doesn't count. It's just, for any hypothesis, it's if you think this being exists, you need to predict it's going to do something at a higher rate than chance or at a higher rate than occurs naturally. So it doesn't matter if it's a gold brick or blinds on the window. It doesn't matter if it happens every time. It just needs to happen more often than it would happen randomly. So if gold bricks just started randomly appearing in people's basement, then it would no longer be evidence of Bob. This is just a natural phenomenon or whatever. So the only point there is that you just need, if this being exists, you need to know something it's going to do at a higher rate than just nature would happen to do on its own.
So again, here's where we'll get into just a difference in perspective, which I know we could chalk it up to that as much as we want, but even with novel testable predictions, you're saying this is what you would expect to find. If this is going to happen, if this was true, this is what you'd expect to find. Well, in my worldview, if God exists, I'm finding what I would expect to find. And in your worldview, if God exists, you're not finding what you would expect to find. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's where we look around and I go, okay, if I were to just take two of them, morality is, I'm finding, if God exists, then I would expect to find morality. I would expect to find a deep sense for a community, not just for survival, not just out of a survival instinct. By the way, I don't need stronger people than me to live in my house. I need other people to live in my house so that I can have relationship with them. One is survival of like a protection. One is survival of what I would call the soul. There is actually a deep felt need that I need relationship. So I'm expecting to find that. I do find that. I'm expecting to find, if there is a being, a personal being that exists, that there would be a personal revelation of that being. I mean, listen, if my girls, my daughters, went around to every man in America with glasses and a beard, which I feel like is like 75% of the men in America, and they're like, "Are you my dad? Are you my dad? Are you my dad?" What they could expect to find if I'm a loving dad is a revelation. I'm your dad, right? Like, hey, they might have superficial similarities, but I'm that. And however I would do that, that's what they could expect to find if I was left. I find that. So even in your standard for testable predictions, I'm going, you know what's interesting? That's just going to be where we disagree. That my perspective on the world, I do see through a lens where if God exists, I would expect to find, oh, I am finding. And you see through a lens of if God exists, you would expect to find an answer to prayers, and you weren't finding. And in your own words, you would worship whatever got rid of the depression if that actually happened. And I think that that's where we go, okay, call it personal bias, call it story. It's a worldview that's where the differences lie.
Well, I think
Because I don't think your standard, by the way, is too low or too high. I think that by your standard, I would go, I am finding that. And you'd go, no, I would call those natural causes. And I go, I just wouldn't. I can't get there through natural causes.
Yeah, so my question would be is why do you think these indicate a God? So like I believe in morality also. Like I believe in objective morality. Most philosophers do. Most philosophers, like the Pew Survey's paper shows that like 70% of philosophers are atheists and about 66% of philosophers believe in objective morality or something. So even though most philosophers are atheists, they also believe in objective morality. I don't think that we also expect morality on a non-God world. We don't need God to expect morality. So the reason we need novel testable predictions is to say, if my hypothesis is true, here's something we don't expect. We don't have any evidence for this yet. This is not something we already know about. Like going to heaven would be great evidence of God. If I go to heaven and meet God, that's great evidence of God. That's a novel testable prediction. But I don't see any of those have ever been confirmed under theism, and most of them have been disconfirmed.
So I guess my question would be back to you. I would say, why do you see as when you think of, okay, expected evidence would be God answering a prayer? Why is that the expected evidence? So I could tell you why I would expect to find the things that I do find. Why would you expect that, okay, if God exists, he would answer prayers?
Well, it was just a made up hypothesis. So like if there's a God who answers prayers, then you would expect him to answer prayers. So whatever your hypothesis about God is, if he has some kind of a nature, you would need to tell me what we would expect to see. So like, as an example, if there is a God who gives gold bricks when you pray to him and you pray to him and he gives you a gold brick, that would just be his nature. So depending on whatever nature of the God you believe in, you would have to tell me what predictions we would expect to see.
Great. So in that, I think that we get into a slippery slope if we're going, if this type of God exists, then we would find him doing this or her, whatever, right? We'd find them being engaging with humanity this way or disengaging with humanity in a certain way. Because at that point, we're just making up God. Okay. If there was a God who loved unicorns, we would expect to find unicorns in this world. If there was a God, what I'm saying is there a God? And okay, and did that God ever reveal themselves? I think if we're asking a different question, if we all day long are going, if there was a God that existed like this, I would expect them to do this. I just think there's an infinite amount of possibilities. And at that point, I don't even know if I'm seeking truth. I think I'm just seeking like, okay, well, that's not the one that exists. That's not the one that exists. That's not the one that exists. But there's a certain point that I'm like, okay, if God exists, did he ever reveal himself? And that's where I go back to how we started the conversation. I do believe in a Jesus-looking God. So I do find that story to be a fascinating and true story. And I know we would disagree there. I mean, there's no way you could say, oh, I fully believe in Jesus and all he said and did according to the Gospels and remain an atheist. I totally understand that. But what I'm saying is, my question is not if this type of God exists, did they do this? But it's going to be, is there a God that ever revealed themselves? And that's where I found the historically Christian account to be convincing. Again, I'm not after certainty. I mean, I there's no way I can't even have absolute certainty this building's not going to fall on me, right? Or when I get in the car and drive to lunch, that I'm not going to get in the car wrecked. I will commit to a course of action based on confidence that I have. I think that's how we all operate. I'm not throwing the word faith in there. I'm just saying I think that's how we live life, right? I married my wife. not because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm 100% certain this is gonna work out. Um, I would just go, I think it works out. I have a sense of confidence, and that's what I'm after here. So based on what I know, I commit to the course of action based on confidence that I have. However, if you are after absolute certainty or it's not true, you're just not going to find it in any worldview. And I would say I think atheism would fall within that as well. I just think it's impossible. We don't have that in life. Yeah.
Right, I totally agree. So I think certainty is something that only exists in math and logic. In science, nothing is certain; it's all probability. So I totally agree. We don't have certainty; it's just based on evidence. Thank you for the super chat, Charles. Besides thoughts and feelings, how does your God map onto reality? Does he manipulate the weather, or has he ever had an amputee regrow a limb?
Oh, great question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah. So. Thank you for the super chat, Darth. That's very funny. He's making fun of my mom. That's funny. Besides thoughts and feelings, how does your God map onto reality? Does he manipulate the weather, or has he ever had an amputee regrow a limb?
Oh, so how God interacts with reality, I would go back to one, I do believe God entered the human narrative. I believe God entered history. Okay, so that's in one way. That would be what I believe. Like outside of miracles, that in and of itself is going to be enough for me to be like, oh, he entered reality, and that's the story of Jesus. Okay, so I do believe that that's what we refer to theological terms as the incarnation. So I believe that happened. As far as people growing limbs, there's no reason to think he didn't. If I believe that God started everything, big bang, okay, but God's the one who started it. If I believe God also is the reason we have the order that we have now, and the reason science works in general, I believe is because of God. If I believe that God came into reality through a virgin birth, I think that growing a limb would be a very small miracle in light of all those other things that I believe. Okay, so there'd be no reason to think not. I do believe miracles take place. I think they're very infrequent. I think that they're, when people, I mean, to use a stupid example, if people pull up to a Walmart on Black Friday, they're like, oh, I got a parking spot right here. Praise the Lord. He was watching out for us.
Help me find my car keys.
Yeah, I know. That's not a miracle. But as far as like actual miracles, yeah, I do believe that they take place. And I think that there's going to be evidence and people to talk to about those things. And there's books written on miracles, modern day miracles. I think they're infrequent though. I think that that's not my standard for whether God exists. My standard would be, much of what we've already talked about, that, okay, I would expect to find, if it's a personal being, that personal being revealing themselves, and I found what I expected. So to answer that question, yes. And growing a limb seems like a rather small thing in light of all the other things, I believe.
Yeah. So you mentioned you thought it was a slippery slope fallacy to ask for novel testable predictions about like what kind of God we could expect, and then you said you look for if he's revealed himself to us or something along those lines. And to me, those seem like they're both important parts to evidence in science. Like the first is I have a hypothesis. So I see something in nature like Jesus is there or whatever. I think Jesus is God. And so he's revealed himself to me. Now then you would need some confirmatory evidence. You'd be like, okay, so if I'm right, what would I expect to see? Well, I'd expect him to rise from the dead in 3 days. That's a very good prediction. If that actually happened, that's great evidence. So you start with, I think, so when you said you thought this was a slippery slope fallacy, that to me, I would disagree, because I think this is the second stage to any kind of investigation. The first stage
we're not allowed to disagree.
What?
We're not allowed to disagree. I'm just kidding.
You're banned. Just ban button.
Oh man.
But yeah, to me it seems like you need both. You need the revelation, or where you think your hypothesis comes from. So you have Jesus. I agree Jesus existed, by the way. I just don't think he was a god of any kind. And so if you think, so Jesus existed, I think Jesus is a god, then you would need something else to confirm that. You need some novel prediction. So I have a hypothesis that explains the data. Now, if that hypothesis is true, here's something new we would expect to see that we don't see yet. So I think you require both of those things. And just having one isn't enough. Just having the novel prediction isn't quite enough, but just the hypothesis isn't enough either. So just saying, okay, so I know Jesus existed in the past, therefore God. You would need to say, okay, so Jesus existed. If he was God, here's something we would expect to see.
So I think that approaching, this is interesting. Let me think through what I'm going to say before I say it. That's always a good thing, right?
Not always. I mean,
More,
the more crazy things you say, the more views I get.
Speaking. Yeah. Well, the more crazy thing, yeah. So let me ask it this way. Existential questions, okay? Questions of the soul, whatever you want to call it. When we're asking questions, where do I come from? Why am I here? Okay. Questions of philosophy, like you mentioned, that helped you get out of depression, that you found to be fascinating. Right?
The philosophy did nothing to help. I just did philosophy. I hoped it would help.
Oh, okay.
Did not, though.
Oh, it did not. So questions of philosophy, questions of the soul, right? Why am I here? Is there anything after this? What is morality? Those sort of things. Those questions to me are fascinating and entirely different than scientific questions. I don't think science can answer those questions, personally. Now, again, we're allowed to disagree. We've disagreed on a lot of things, most things, and had a pleasant conversation. But I think questions. So in one sense, we could say, well, yeah, those questions don't matter. But then you're like, well, wait a second, they do matter. Like depression, I've dealt with depression and anxiety as well, and it wasn't a prayer that got me out of it. There's times where I still deal with it. Okay, I've been on medication. I see a therapist. I mean, do I wish that God would heal me from it every day? Of course, but it's just that doesn't happen. But depression matters because what it does, it actually affects. I'll speak of myself. I wouldn't project this on you, but it actually affects my sense of worth and being. Like it matters in as much as those questions matter. So if I'm trying to draw up a hypothesis on what type of God exists, I think I'm stepping into a discipline that can't answer the core questions that actually need to be asked. So when I say depression affects me, anxiety, or let's just stick with depression because anxiety is more situational for me. When I say depression exists and it affects me, it doesn't just affect my body. I would actually say it first affects those questions that are outside of the realm of scientific hypothesis. It's affecting the questions of being and worth and significance. Then I feel sick, right? Then I feel unmotivated. So, in what you're saying, I think is fascinating. I just don't think they're the questions that get us to God. I just think we're talking about two totally different disciplines here. I mean, you would probably agree, philosophy and science are two entirely different disciplines.
Not exactly. I think that science is philosophy plus a way to differentiate imagination from reality, whereas philosophy is just more of a broad thinking about thinking. So I think that science is it's like all roses are flowers, but not all flowers are roses. So all science is a part of philosophy, but not all philosophy is a part of science. But I think science can't answer those questions. Like I think, let's say God and Jesus were real. Science could say, if God is real, when I die, I will meet God and Jesus in heaven. I die, I meet God and Jesus in heaven. Science has now given us the answer to all of those questions. So I don't think science can't answer those questions.
Well, see, how did science then give us the answer to those questions?
Science says,
I guess.
Yeah, it would be like, if God grounds objective morality, God exists, then we will meet him in the afterlife. We die, we meet him in the afterlife, and that confirms morality exists. The hypothesis is that if God grounds morality, he will exist and we'll see him in the afterlife. We die, we see him in the afterlife. That confirms the hypothesis that morality is grounded in this existing God thingy. So,
and yeah, I guess my disagreement would be in the hypothesis and drawing up certain hypothesis in being so certain in which type of God would exist. Because here's what I would do. I would never even say, if God exists, then when I die, I'm going to go to heaven or hell. I wouldn't even say that. Because I'd be like, well, wait a second. how do I know? I know what evangelical Christianity says. But then you're also gonna, I mean, you grew up Catholic. I mean, now let's talk about purgatory, right? There's like how many options on the spectrum of the afterlife are there? I just don't think that sort of hypothesis is going to prove or disprove God. I think what we're after in that sense is what I said we just can't have in life, and that's a sense of certainty. Now, there's a predictive element to nature and science. I totally understand that. But I think philosophy is different. I think you cannot predict um, with a sense of certainty like you can with science philosophical questions. Now, we can arrive at different conclusions, but they're just different disciplines. I think questions of why are different than questions of how. There would be some overlap for sure, but I just think that I think we're dealing with different disciplines there.
I'm not sure if I'm following. So like if I died and went to Brahman, I think that'd be evidence of Buddhism. If I died and went to heaven or purgatory, I think that'd be evidence of Christianity. So I think that we can do that. So like the Buddhists would say, I think the Buddhist God is real. When you die, you'll go into reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into reincarnation, that's good evidence that they're right and Christianity is wrong. But if we go and we meet heaven at the pearly gates or whatever, that's good evidence Christianity is right and Buddhism is wrong. So I'm not seeing why that wouldn't work, because it seems like it does. It seems like we can say, if God is real, or if the Christian God is real, here are some very specific things we would expect, and we'd not expect the opposite of that. And if the Buddhist God is real, the Buddhist Dharma is real, here's what we would expect. And if it does the Christian way, well, then that one's wrong. It seems like we can definitely make those kinds of predictions.
Well, I guess because you're talking about the afterlife, I feel like we can't. So it's like you said, pearly gates. Well, what does that mean, right? So it's like in the way I see pearly gates. So if I don't see pearly gates in the afterlife the way I see them now, then that means that the Christian God doesn't exist. That would be silly. What does pearly gates mean? What is it referring to? Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Of we just can't have those predictive qualities when we're dealing with the afterlife. We can now. We can when we're talking about this, and this is where we go. We have this back and forth. Is I'm saying if the Christian God exists, well, then I would expect to find what I have. And that's what's so fascinating, by the way, of the Jesus story for me, is you have a whole Jewish people that are going, okay, if God exists, then we would expect this, 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 and this. And then you have Jesus on the scene, the Messiah, the fulfillment of the law and prophets, going, actually, this is what God's like. So even in the Christian story, you have people trying to do what you said. If the Jewish God exists, then this would happen. And then you have in the story, God going, actually, I do exist, and these are not the things that are going to happen. I'm not going to reign in political power when I'm here. The poor, the whole Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, those are the people that are inheriting the kingdom of God now, speaking of the kingdom of God in different ways. That's what I'm saying is, when I say slippery slope, when we're using these novel, testable predictions, it already has, in the Christian story, proven to not be what we think it's going to be. And so that's why I go, I don't know if we can use that standard. That makes sense?
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely have a question about that, but I have to think about how to phrase it. And in the meantime,
And then I may have to jump off here in like a minute, but
all right, yeah. So
that question.
yeah, so I got some super chats. I'll ask those guys first. Thanks, Indo. Zelmaxis, Osiris, Romulus, etc. Dying, rising, personal gods were very common. What are the odds that Jesus is the only true one? Even Hercules' mother left an empty tomb with an eyewitness.
Well, I didn't know about Hercules' mother, but I can study that. Okay. What are the odds that Jesus is the true one? I think that what we get into is the reliability of the Gospels, and then we're going to get into whenever we look at the explosion of the early church, and we're going to get into the writings, the dating of the early Gospels, and then I think that, and then we get into, was this eyewitness? Were these eyewitness accounts? Were these not eyewitness accounts? Obviously, I'm trying to go fast here. Okay, but then we're going to say, okay, then some of these details weren't very flattering to the people writing them. So there's just a lot of different things about the narrative of the Gospels and the eyewitnesses. And like you said, I mean, you even said you believe Jesus existed. You obviously don't believe that he came back from the dead. And so we have people that talk about Jesus outside. We have extra biblical authority and extra biblical literature that talk about Jesus in a way that you're like, okay, so what is it about this man? I do think there's credence to the C.S. Lewis stance, liar, lunatic, or Lord, that Jesus, with everything that he said and did, he couldn't just be a good man. He was either a liar, a lunatic, or truly Lord, truly the Son of God. And so, what are the odds? Well, the odds are that I would go back to say all those other stories are indicators that humanity is longing for God and a personal God. And I know that you and I have disagreed on that, but all of those stories are indicators that we've been longing. So the odds are actually really high that God would have a true story so that the indicators don't just have to be like us looking around, but that it's the full revelation of God. So the odds are high that God would do something like that. That'd be my answer.
Awesome. We have one last super chat. It's more of a comment. Efont, thank you for the super chat. Christianity gave me depression. It created a neuroplastic pathway that made me think I was never good enough and I was inherently flawed.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And I totally believe that that's the case with a lot of Christianity. And I would never defend whatever people have done to you. And I'm sorry that happened. So.
Yeah, awesome. I want to be respectful of your time. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Do you want to give any shout outs to where people can find you if they're interested in checking out your stuff?
Yeah, you can go to thedoubtersclub.com. You can email me at preston@thedoubtersclub.com or order the book. This was fun. We should do this again.
Absolutely. I definitely want to go into more of the liar, legend, Lord thing. I definitely have an interesting response to that. But thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. And I will let you go. You can just close the screen.
Hey, thanks so much. All right, you got it. Hey, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, let's go to the after show on the Discords. After show on the Discords. After show on the Discords. After show. If anybody would like to jump in, ask any questions after show. At everyone after show time. Indo giving away my secrets there, bruh. Thanks for watching, John. Indo, thanks, guys. I love that argument. I love this argument down here. Goth girls exist. Only a perfect being could create goth girls. God exists. That is a strong argument. Michael, T-Jump, what's your answer to the liar, lunatic, Lord? My position is that the same argument could be applied to literally everyone who claimed to interact with or believe in a God. So many people claim to have seen God, claim to be related to God, claim to be a God, and all of them would have to either be a liar, lunatic, legend, or Lord, but none of them were lunatics. Because it's a common brain function that people could come up with this, I believe, they're not lunatics. They're just having a normal brain function, which is just untrue, just like religious people. Like, it would be inaccurate to say that religious people are delusional or lunatics because they believe in a God, because it's a normal brain function. And so they're not lunatics, and they're not liars, and there's not a God, so they're none of those things. So the problem with the liar, lunatic, liar, lunatic, legend, whatever, liar, lunatic, Lord, is that they're not lunatics. Lunatic isn't one of the options. There's another option there, is that they just have a normal human brain function, which is not correct, which doesn't correspond to reality. So I think that the option that is omitted from that trichotomy is the fact that they're a normal human brain function that is not in correspondence to reality. So I wouldn't call that a lunatic. It's overblown to call them lunatics. They just don't understand reality as much, or they don't have a correspondence with reality as much. That's what I would do to respond to the liar, lunatic, Lord thingy. T-Jump, will there ever be a boy born who can swim faster than a shark? Possibly. Depends how, like, given enough time in evolution, sure. I mean, there are definitely sharks born who can't swim, so I can technically swim faster than some sharks. Some sharks are super small and can't swim that fast. So yes, it is true that some boys will be born and able to swim faster than sharks. Breed sharks to swim slower. Well, I mean, that might make you a profit in Japan where they like farm shark fins. What's up, people in the voice chat? How's it going? T-Jump, which is more reliable, attested witness testimony, Mormonism, Christianity, or Islam? Oh, the testimony of Mormonism, Christianity, or Islam. None of the above. I'm gonna go with none of the above. I don't think any of them are. I think they're all the same. Anybody in the YouTube or Twitch chat wants to, you can join the after show, the discord.io/tjump. Voice your opinions, thoughts on the debates, thoughts on the previous conversation, which is the least reliable. And I think the level of reliability is dependent on the claim of the personal experience, not the religion itself. So each individual who claims to have personal experience of a God will have different levels of reliability based on what they claimed, not the religion that they claimed it for. An Office reference? The Shark Boy is an Office reference? Oh no, was that the shark swimming thingy? Create a beer company named responsibly. Oh, I get it, because they say drink responsibly. Yes, free advertising. I get it. That's funny. T-Jump, what do you tell Jehovah's Witnesses when they knock on your door? I say, hold on a minute, I'm going to get my phone. We're going to do some streaming. That's what I say. Because that's the best way to do it. If you get to Jehovah's Witnesses, just turn on TikTok, do some recording, record the conversation, get much views. Carlos Jeffers, how do you actually join the after show? I can see the VC, but nothing happens when I click it. See the VC. This thingy right here, it's now currently over my head. Call in link. There's a call in link on the screen. It's currently moving around my head. If you go to the link, https://discord, go on there, and then there's a little in the box on the website. There's an after show voice chat, and you join the after show and click it. Huh, maybe at Carlos. Can't join VC. Thank you, Jacob, for the super chat. And let us bring the chair of T-Jump back to us, for we have not inquired at it since the days of men. Yes, beautiful. Jerry Wilson, T-Jump, in your epistemology, how do you get from cogito ergo sum to materialism? How do you prove materialism over sim theory? For example, in both models, science could make novel testable predictions. So, in my model, we start with cogito, I think therefore I am, and then we say we need some way to differentiate our imagination from our experience. Like, I imagine a unicorn, I don't see a unicorn. We need to differentiate between the two. And the way we differentiate between the two is novel testable predictions. Your imagination is very bad at predicting the future, so if you have a model that can predict the future, it's more rational to believe that that model corresponds to reality than your imagination does. So if you have a model that says there is an external world and it can give you testable predictions, that's a reasonable thing to believe. If someone else has a different model, then it just post hoc explains the same predictions, so then it's not reasonable to believe. So that's how I go from cogito to materialism. Start with I think therefore I am, and then say I need some way to differentiate my imagination from experience, then come up with a hypothesis, there is an external world and these laws govern it or whatever. If that actually predicts the future, then it's reasonable to believe there's an external world. Let's try Carlos invite. There we go. I really enjoyed the Sunday politics Christian debate thing on the politics server. That was really good. I'm planning to do that every few weeks now. That'll be a good opportunity to debate more theists. We need more theists in this server to come in and join shit. Join the after shows to talk about shit.
I know. I feel like I'm the only one. Come on, Pete.
It does. There's not enough. Not enough. Efont, I was pushing your morality to some other atheists. I was doing it poorly. I tried to explain that it may be something that may be discovered like a law of nature. They claim it's not objective. How is that not objective? If it's a law, if it's undiscovered law of physics, then it's by definition objective. Objective just means true, independent of opinion. So if it exists independent of opinion, it must be objective. So I don't know how atheists would think that's not objective. It doesn't make sense.
You are T-Jump. Am I wrong in saying you're a moral realist? I was
Yes,
under the
I
impression.
am a moral realist. That is correct.
I thought so. I just wasn't sure.
Like most philosophers and most atheist philosophers, moral realist.
Well, I think. Is it? Does that mean you think that morality is objective?
Yes.
Or that they're objective moral facts?
Yes.
Because I've heard people say, well, of course, morality is real. I interact with it on a daily basis, but they don't mean to say that it's objective.
Yeah. So it's kind of like race realism or something like that. It's morality is real is not the same thing as moral realism. The terms mean slightly different things. Like scientific realism doesn't just mean science is real, or race realism doesn't just mean race is real. So moral realism means that there are moral statements that are true independent of opinion. So it's like there are objectively true moral statements. So like killing babies is wrong would be an objectively true thing independent of opinion. It's a moral realism. It's just contingent on opinion, then it's not moral realism. Sunken, are you in other atheists or no Christian religious discords that you could invite people here from? Is anybody in other Christian discords that they could invite people here from?
I can try PNR.
I don't mean like literally right now. I just mean in general, the goal would be to get more Christians to come in the server. And the best way to do it would be like set things up like in PNR and other things. Sample pack. TJump, how can you know your depression is cured and not just temporarily alleviated? Well, those are technically the same thing. So, like, if it's temporarily cured, it's like if you remove your cancer, it's gone. Even if it comes back, it was cured for a while. So, my depression has been cured for about 5 months. I haven't had it with very, very small changes. So, that's pretty good indication it's cured. But of course, it could definitely come back if my relationship situation changes. Giz McCarthy Git. That is interesting. As if T-Jump became depressed again, would it be the same depression as before or a new depression? I think it would be a new depression. So I think that the way depression works is that it's a consistent thing. It is something that is a regular occurrence in your life. And if it stops being a regular occurrence, then you don't have it anymore. It's not depression anymore. And so as long as it is no longer a regular occurrence or is just one-off or whatever, then it's not really depression. And so if you cure the fact that it's a regular occurrence, then you've cured the depression. Of course, if it becomes a regular occurrence again, then it's a new depression. Yes, you could say either one, depending on the context and meaning of cured or temporarily alleviated. Either one could technically apply. Travis Statham, do the Reddits are Catholicism or are debate a Catholic? I don't do anything on Reddit. Thank you, Sample Pack. I think that's actually like in the medical definition of like major depressive disorder is a persistent reoccurring depression or whatever. And so if you don't have it persistent and reoccurring, it's no longer major depression. Band of Hawks, T-Jump versus J Dyer round 2. Yes, that would give me lots of views. I'd get lots of views for yelling at J Dyer again. That would be quite viewy.
Hey Tom, can you hear me?
Yep, how's it going?
How's it going, mate? Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, thanks for the invite. I don't know what was going on with the link, but before, but I couldn't seem to get in when I was tapping on the voice chat. It just the only time I can get in when you actually sent me the link directly. So
no idea
different.
What's causing that.
Yeah, it's Discord's changed because it used to have a main stage that you could just click into, and it seems to have changed now. But yeah, no, I was going to ask you about what do you understand scientism to be?
Scientism.
Yeah.
Scientism is the belief that science is the only way to know anything.
Okay. Because I think you mentioned earlier in your show that when I was watching that novel testable predictions is the only way to be able to distinguish imagination from reality.
Yes, but not the only way to know anything. So like you can know things just by thinking about it and it is purely imaginary. Like I can know 1 + 1 = 2, that's imaginary. But that's okay. So you only need to differentiate imagination from reality if you're trying to learn something about independent of your imagination, but you can still know things about your imagination just fine. So science isn't the only way to know anything, but it is the way that I know about to differentiate imagination from reality, which is a certain kind of things that you can know, but not all kinds of things. You can definitely know things about your imagination. Jesse White, good morning, T-Jump. Thanks for answering a bunch of my questions the other day. You're welcome. Anytime.
So like for the unknown things that are yet to be known, do you think those can only be explained by novel testable predictions?
Not exactly. It's Like some unknown things probably can't be known through novel testable predictions. Not all unknown things can necessarily be known, but you definitely need some way to differentiate imagination from reality. And novel predictions is the way I know about. There might be other ways to differentiate imagination from reality that we don't know about yet. And that's definitely true. But I don't think necessarily that novel predictions will be the end-all be-all.
You could theoretically just be epistemically lucky and imagine something that happens to be the case, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, but then, like you say, question remains: how do you know if you've imagined the correct thing?
Yep. You'd still need some additional way to verify it, it's not just imaginary.
Yeah, I guess it's just a case of, obviously we happen to live in a time where we obviously acquired a lot more knowledge than people 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, but there's still so much more to know. And because science is the only way we know to sort of acquire new knowledge, it's like theists will sort of use that against an atheist and say, oh, you only believe in science is the only way to sort of know things, and you sort of get into that kind of argument with them, don't you?
I don't even think, I could be wrong, but I don't even think most atheists would say science is the only way to know things, even if they mean knowledge in like philosophical sense of like high levels of certainty about what's true. Like science is just one way of applying empiricism, right? Like it's not even, so maybe I'm speaking for people out of turn here, but I definitely don't hear anybody just saying science is the only way to know things.
That is the straw man. So scientism is a straw man that theists use against atheists by saying that. But yeah, most atheists don't think that science is the only way to know things. So, but other contexts like personal experience or whatever are reliable for certain things, but not certain other things. So I think it's more, the more accurate way to phrase it would be is science is the only way to verify new things as actually existing independent of your imagination. And that's more the relevant thing, because the theist objection is that, oh, well, science can't verify God, therefore you can't use the standard of science or whatever.
I mean, this might be a tautology, but like, I think it's, as a theist, I think it's not unreasonable for me or anybody else to say, I know that there's a God, and it doesn't really matter the method by which you came to know it, but I know that there's a God, and I know that science can't address that thing that I know to be the case, and so therefore, science doesn't address all forms of knowledge that I hold, right? So
that seems kind of post hoc. Lumifarious Ethan, did you see the Pine Creek's interview with Dr. Habermas? No, I did not see that. Dr. Habermas, Gary Habermas, Habermasy. Go ahead, Duncan.
Oh, that was it. I don't disagree that it's kind of post hoc, but I think that's in the realm of reasoning. That's most of what everybody is doing all of the time.
I don't think so.
I think so, but I can't know what everybody else is doing. It's just, I think that that's how most people are justifying their forms of knowledge that aren't explicitly like couched within science.
Well, like for mine, I start with cogito. I think therefore I am, and that's not technically couched within science because it's not a novel prediction. I'm just experiencing.
Yeah, like I mean, if I say something to you that's empirical in nature but not scientific, like I feel that God exists. That's a claim about what I feel. You can't obviously you can't deny that I feel that way.
Well, empirical is sense experience.
Yeah, and feeling is a sense, in my opinion. It's I'm sensing something that I think is real, right? Or anyone else in that position would think is real. That obviously doesn't mean it is real, but it does make it empirical, like an empirical sort of. I'm trying to think of the right word. Endeavor.
Never.
Like understanding why, what is the reason why I think that there's a God is the same kind of endeavor to me as understanding the reason why I think that there's a rock in front of me. Both information for both are coming into my sense data, and then I'm reasoning about it afterwards.
Well, unless you can literally see and touch God like you can see and touch a rock, I don't think those would be the same thing.
That,
You're Sunken, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
sorry, that was my fault. I said they're not exactly the same thing, but they are the same kind of thing in the sense that like
Well,
they're both based on sense data. Like I go ahead, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure what you mean by sense data here, because I don't see this. I think there's a difference between imagining a unicorn and thinking it exists and seeing a rock and thinking it exists. I think those are clearly two different things. I got a question. One sec. Javier Jara, did you hear of any way in that presuppositionalism you can make novel predictions? No, in presup it has nothing to do with novel predictions. You have to like presuppose God exists.
Yeah, but you if a person has unicorn sense, like you get the feeling when unicorns are around you, if that's a thing, then it is different. Imagining that there are unicorns and believing them is different than sensing them and then believing that they exist, right? If you have the unicorn sense, just as an example.
I don't know what that would mean. Like, I don't think a unicorn sense would count as evidence.
Well, I guess that depends on the framework you're using to say what is evidence, but it's fine if you don't count a unicorn sense as evidence, but
Well, I think the more you'd have to verify that your unicorn sense was reliable before you trusted it. You couldn't just say because you have it, it's trustworthy.
Yeah, I mean I understand. I agree with that. I'm just saying that like if you decide to reason about your unicorn sense, and even though you don't ever see or hear or feel a unicorn, if you decide to reason about your unicorn sense to see if it's trustworthy, and what you find is that you can infer the existence of unicorns by some other means, like say inductive reasoning, and then you say, and so my unicorn sense is telling me about something I think is really there. That's different than just imagining it to think it's real.
I'm not sure
Even if they're
that.
wrong.
One second, I got another comment. Jesse, what do you think of the scenario Christian apologists cause? What do I think of the scenarios Christian apologists cause by lying about Nazi Germany and Hitler being atheist? I mean, I think that they cherry pick the fact that he said he didn't believe in a God and then create a false association that's the justification for his actions. So I think it's definitely wrong that they do that, but it's inspired a lot by the history of who was writing the history books at the time. So going back to Sunken, so it seems like even if you had independent reason to think unicorns existed, that still wouldn't mean your unicorn sense is trustworthy, because you could just be having some random brain sensation and thinking it's unicorns. Like, let's say I have a dog sensor or whatever. I can feel that there's a dog nearby or whatever. But that doesn't, even if dogs exist, that doesn't mean my dog sensor is working. So it seems like you would have to find some independent way to verify that your unicorn sensor was reliable before that was something worthy of trusting. And in the case of a God, if you had some independent reason to believe in a God, you'd have to assess that independently of your sensing it.
Yeah, but like I agree that like because there's a dog, or there can be dogs, that and it doesn't imply inversely that your dog sense is always working correctly, but
Or ever working correctly.
Yeah, but if you see dogs and you say I'm receiving sense data about dogs, and one of the things that happens consistently, even if it doesn't happen every time, is that when I see something that's like a dog, there's usually a dog there, and I'm using other methods to determine that there's a dog there other than what I'm seeing, right? Like I'm touching it, or I'm having other people confirm that there's a dog there.
Sure, but we don't see unicorns or God.
Well, but I'm using see here as just a standard for any particular sense. It just happens that you can see if you have a God sense, right, and it's reliable. because there is a God, then that's not the same thing as imagining.
Well, no, because that would be like there's two separate senses in the dog example where you have the dog sense and you can have these other senses. You touch it, you feel it, etc. But in the God case, you have one sense. You have just the God sense. And so there's no other confirmatory senses there. That would be the difference between those two. Right? Disagree?
Well, no, I agree with you, but I think that there are things that we would both agree that are real, like mathematics, that barely even have one sense associated with them, right?
Hey, Woody, how's it going?
You can't touch or smell or feel mathematics, but
we can compare mathematics to reality. So we can say if 1 + 1 = 2, when I add this rock to this rock, I get 2 rocks. Like, so that seems like there's a confirmatory sense there that we can test math with our other senses. Like we can correspond it to sense and touch and all those things.
Oh, well, I guess that's the distinction between whether math is a description or a prescription, right? Like, I mean, or whether math is mind independent.
Yeah, Tom, you
Yep.
know, you was talking about scientism earlier being a straw man, and like I do agree with that it is just a straw man. I think, like you said earlier, that obviously most atheists would subscribe to having analytical truths as well. So you don't just need science. But when it comes to like the supernatural, let's say there was a supernatural realm or it's non-material in some way, some non-material realm, because we're like physical beings in a physical universe, like it's like any non-material entity, the only way it could interact with us is through like physical effects. It doesn't seem like there would be any distinction that we would be able to make between the supernatural and just being, like you say, an unknown natural thing. Like, how would you actually be able to tell the difference? Because we're sort of stuck in the physical world.
Well, you could tell the difference. Like, if you have a hypothesis, there is a supernatural thing and it affects the natural world, like that would be perfectly fine. Like, we just use the methods we have now to tell the difference. Like, you could always say, in my hypothesis, there is this completely other realm, and if we could interact with it some way in the natural world, that would be evidence of it. I don't see. I think there'd be a problem there.
Would that not just be an undetermined, or maybe even an overdetermined, unknown natural thing that we just don't understand, and we just attribute it to Bob?
It could be, but just like that would be the same as saying we could be in the Matrix. Like, all of the stuff we're seeing and experiencing could be not what we're seeing and experiencing. Like saying the world is round or whatever. Say when we go to space, we look, oh look, there's the world. It's round. All of the science shows the world is round. Well, maybe we're actually in the Matrix and it's flat or whatever. It's possible. Like, you could always say that, but all of the evidence seems to indicate the hypothesis that makes the successful prediction. So if a hypothesis made tons of successful predictions about supernatural or magic or whatever, could that just be an unknown natural thing? It could be. But if the hypothesis that's making all the successful predictions says it's magic or whatever, or new ontology of the supernatural ontology, then that would be reasonable to believe.
So I suppose it just comes down to, like you say, whoever comes up with the prediction first gets the credit, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, that always, I do get that explanation. It just seems that does always seem to be on shaky ground, like it, because like you say, there is, infinite ways to describe any event. So, anyone getting the predictions right first, obviously, to say that there's a Bob there is a whole new ontology. I suppose you'd have to do a lot more to prove that there is an actual Bob there and that it's in any way connected with the gold brick appearing or whatever.
Well, you can never prove it. That's the problem of underdetermination. You can the only the best explanation is always just going to be whichever the first one is that can make predictions. You'll never be able to prove it with 100% certainty. That's the point of one of the problems of science.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get you. Thank you.
Yep. Sample pack, what is the highest level of math you've taken? Some kind of calculus, I think. Woody, how's it going?
Sorry. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Mr. Ape, what is your best argument against theism? My best argument against theism is the fact that most things human make up are imaginary. If you can't have independent evidence of something that some idea humans have, then it's most likely just imaginary. God has no evidence, therefore it's likely just imaginary. Woody, I'm doing pretty good. I'm really tired. I didn't get enough sleep. I fell asleep at like 3, 4 a.m., 4 or 5 a.m. So I did not get sufficient sleep. So I'm very tired. But overall, I'm doing pretty good. Not bad.
That's good to hear.
You like that I didn't get enough sleep?
I didn't got enough sleep either. I'm doing good too. So
John L., when is your next debate? Tomorrow at 7. Then I have one on Sunday. Then I have 2 on Monday. Then I have 1 on Thursday and 1 on Friday.
Definitely putting out the content at the moment, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, I'm trying to be more consistent and do more stuff. What I'm struggling with is like sending all the emails. I fucking hate sending out all the emails. I need somebody to send out emails for me and set up conversations. That would be the greatest thing to have at this point. Jesse White, T-Jump and his guest. If mankind could upload our consciousness into a computer to create our own digital paradise, would you two take the opportunity to avoid death? Yes. Yes, I would do that. Would you guys do that, Carlos or Sunken? Thank you, Michael King. Appreciate the sub.
I'm trying to figure out who would say no to that, because...
Well, I mean, a lot of Christians would be like, no, I'd rather go to heaven.
Oh, yeah, but heaven is what was just described. That's just... that's reframing heaven, right?
I don't think so. I think because that's kind of the point of the question is like, if we here on Earth had a computer and could upload your consciousness, would you do it? Or would you maintain a biological form and die and potentially go to God heaven?
If I had a high level of confidence that God heaven was real, and we're talking about the technology we have now, obviously God heaven would be leaps and bounds above what we could do now, like a Matrix style paradise. So I'll take God heaven. But yeah, if it's a perfect paradise, it doesn't really seem to matter which I choose. And since I don't have a high level of confidence that God heaven exists, I'll take the digital paradise.
That's interesting. So you think that it would be possible for humans to technologically make a heaven equal to God's heaven?
Oh, for sure. I am a particular kind of theist that you probably come across. I'm someone who thinks that God is entirely within our reality. He's a thing like we are, and so he's just as limited.
So, I mean, I think most theists think God is within reality. I think that's a common thing. But what do you mean by that? You said,
like the whatever is foundational to reality, and not that I know what those things are, but whatever those things are, whatever is foundational, is are barriers that we can't cross, but they're also barriers that God can. So, like, as long as the simulation were perfect, I wouldn't know the difference.
Travis Statham, T-Jump needs a girlfriend. I am dating someone right now.
Oh, that poor person.
What?
Oh, God damn it.
Jerry Wilson, in your epistemology, what lends more weight to materialism over something like sim theory? Could novel testable predictions exist in both frameworks? So why choose one of the other? It's the order. So in Jerry, because novel testable predictions, the hypothesis started with materialism and more people use the materialism hypothesis to make successful predictions, that's the better hypothesis. If you used novel predictions, if you had the hypothesis that we were in a simulation theory and started to do science and that started to take over as the primary hypothesis, then that would be evidence. But right now, pretty much everybody just uses the materialism hypothesis to make predictions. Jimmy G, let me be clear. This is for your chair, not you. Buy it some cleanser or something. Oh, wow, that is a big kitty.
People are real big fans of your chair for some reason.
Yes, it is the mascot of the channel. You always need a mascot.
Have you read the Bible, T-Jump?
Yes.
I'm not asking. Okay.
Cover to cover, multiple times.
Okay. I'm not being rude. You seem like exactly the type of person, and this is not meant as an insult, that might simply decide not to.
I was religious when I was a kid.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I was brought up Christian and went to Catholic grade school and Catholic high school.
Oh, interesting. Can I ask, I'm not asking for like a thesis here, just generally, do you think the average person benefits or doesn't benefit from having and reading the Bible?
I think that's more of a time-based thing. Michael King, I love the chair. I want one. It's a Lazy Boy Crandall recliner. You can buy. I think they discontinued them. They don't sell them anymore, but they're like $1,000 each. I got mine discounted, which is nice. I think that in the past, having religious belief was beneficial to people. I think today it is not as beneficial to people because we have alternatives that are better. So I think religion is kind of like technology. Like, is it beneficial for any person to have a spear? Like in the past, yes, it was extremely beneficial for every person to have a spear. Now, not so much. So I think religion is the same thing as technology in that it was technologically beneficial at one time, psychologically, but today, not as much.
So, and this is kind of a addendum to that. As literature, should people seriously interested in literature own a Bible, do you think?
It depends. Like, if your interest in literature is anything considered popular, I guess, like, I would say that The Great Gatsby is terrible writing. It's garbage. But many people who are interested in literature own The Great Gatsby. So interest in literature is mostly just subjective. What do you like, kind of a thing. Like, I think the greatest literature ever is Harry Potter. He sounds like Karen.
Yeah, Tom, I see you're not too far off the 10K subs now, man. Are you doing anything special or?
Nope.
No.
I'll probably make a video and mention it.
Yeah.
Like
a marathon call-in show or something.
Marathon call-in show. Call-in shows never got that many views though. That's why I stopped doing them. Like, they always get like a third or half to a third of what the normal views are, and so I just stopped doing them because they don't get as much interests.
I think the after shows that you've been doing pretty cool. I think they work.
Yeah, they do a lot better. They do a lot. The after shows do a lot better than call-ins or Q&As. Thank you, Outdoor Earthling. Always loving also loving the content. Appreciate it.
You should, for 10K, you should dye your hair blue and play Mario Maker 2.
It sounds like work. If I'm paid, if somebody buys me the game and pays for me to get my hair done, I'll do it. But technically, that's true. Whenever, if anybody ever paid me to get my hair done, I'd do it. Like, give me the cost to do it, and give me like a bonus. I'd go do it right now. So materialism, in your view, is arbitrary. In other words, if sim theory was the first hypothesis, that would be the dominant one now, and materialism would be secondary. Like, no, that's not what arbitrary means. So arbitrary means not based on any consistent pattern or system of rules. Whichever comes first is a system of rules, so it's not arbitrary. But yeah, if whichever hypothesis came first and was able to tell us about the future first would be the dominant one. Like if the Bible literally said, your God created the universe and everything is made of DNA double helixes. And I made it 13.8 billion years ago, and et cetera, then we'd all be Christian. So whichever model comes first and is able to predict the future first is the one everyone will accept. That's necessarily the case.
Yeah, back then they did astrology. That's how they looked at the stars and then they hypothesis based on the stars. Anyway,
What? Stars? What about stars?
Hey, Tim, I have a question for you. You don't have to answer this, but this is a legitimate question. Like, have you ever done any form of drugs, cannabis?
Yes.
Weed? Oh, you have? Oh, shit.
None of them made me feel good.
That's interesting. I was curious about that. Okay. What was your experience? What have you done? Share your story.
I think weed, shrooms, some other stuff. I don't know what it was. They just gave it to me. Mostly alcohol, which I don't like at all. They all make me feel bad.
Okay. Did you took a lot? Or how many did you took? Do you know?
Yes, I started off small because it was like the first time ever doing drugs, and they just kept increasing the amount until I couldn't walk, and I still didn't feel good.
Okay.
Tom, do you think sex is a drug?
Oh, you said
No,
you started as
sex
small
is a
what?
physical action. It's not a drug. No, it causes chemicals in your brain to fire, but it's not a drug.
What have you started with? Like you said, you started small. What was that substance?
It was small. We started with small amounts. It was different substances. I always start with a small amount, see what it did, and then increase it later, and go with larger amounts. So like start with microdosing, just do really small amounts, and then increase it to larger amounts to see if it did anything. But they always made me feel like shit.
That's a recommended. Okay, well that's interesting. You're not compatible. You know that.
Diet Coke is disgusting. Cherry Coke, Cherry Pepsi, Cherry Coke are the best. They are the superior the soda race.
At least try it.
That's right, Efont. I am Slytherin. I would be a Slytherin house from Harry Potter for sure, every time, without any doubt. Genius Track says, I want to experience something psychedelic, but I'm afraid my anxiety would kick in.
No.
Like, yeah, drugs for me just made me feel sick and depressed. Like, it mostly just unlocked more of my depression and made me feel worse and awful. Never made me feel good. Same with alcohol. Same with caffeine. Like, even if I have too much caffeine, the same thing happens. I like coffee because of the way it tastes, but the caffeine does nothing for me.
I microdose on the cannabis and it helps me beneficial, but I don't recommend if you're scared on it and if you don't know what you're doing. Probably better that you just to try it small dose, and if it's not for you, then don't do it.
Jimmy G, wow, you heard it here. T-Jump is racist towards Diet Coke because Diet Coke isn't real Coke. It's not a real soda. It's a fake soda. It's an inferior fake soda.
I mean, I kind of don't disagree with that. Like, at first it might seem arbitrary, but the truth is that it uses the name Coke to confuse you. So it's a sham, right? It attempts to be Coke and fails.
Exactly. It is completely just not. Diet Coke is like a Chinese knockoff that uses the same label and changes one of the letters and tastes nothing like it.
Or it's for those idiots that want to cut back on the sugar.
I think that's what happened was Diet Coke. The recipe for Diet Coke was they just took one of the Chinese knockoffs and like, we're going to use this.
Zero is an improvement, but it's still not that good.
Nano says, I like vanilla Coke. I was not a fan of vanilla. There's also, they have a cherry vanilla, which was slightly better, but I don't like the vanilla. It's not very good.
Not a great conversation.
Was an orange Coke for a little while, and it was strange.
I tried that one. I tried the orange Coke and the orange Pepsi and the diets of all of those. And the Dr. Pepper was doing a mix like that too, which is pretty cool. Dr. Pepper, I think there's a cherry Dr. Pepper. There used to be.
Which is weird because I think it already has cherry in the flavoring profile of it, or has already included. But the zeros, there's zero sugar as opposed to diet, which is, I mean, theoretically it's the same thing, but they must have reformulated them because a lot of them, like the Dr. Pepper Zero sugar, is way better than the Diet Dr. Pepper. Like, it's not Dr. Pepper, but it's getting better.
Yeah, they just changed it to a different kind of carbohydrate, which did nothing, and now they do the alternative sugars, which your body can't process, which is why it has 0 calories, because your body can't process it.
I don't mind. I mean, I get a relatively nice tasting soft drink, and I don't get any of the calories for drinking a soft drink. That's a pretty good trade-off, honestly, if you ask me.
If it was edible, yes, but it's not even edible. Crystal Pepsi. I don't think I've had Crystal Pepsi. I don't think I've ever tried it. Looks like Sprite.
It's just Pepsi. It's regular Pepsi, nothing different, undyed, just clear.
That's funny. Mexican Cokes. The Mexican Cokes are all right, but I don't like them as much as Cherry Pepsi and Cherry Coke. Cherry Pepsi and Cherry Coke is still better than Mexican Cokes.
Is the Mountain Dew popular over in the US? It got banned over here. We used to have it over here, but it got banned.
It's quite popular. I can't imagine why it would get banned.
What got
it's
banned?
Not any worse than any other soft drink.
What got banned?
We used to have Mountain Dew like years ago, like over 10 years ago. But the shops don't stock it anymore. So I don't know 100% if it was banned, but like, we can't get it here. Well, we used to get it.
It's an overreaction. It's not particularly worse than any other soft drink. It's ridiculous.
It might have been probably a copyright thing. I doubt it was like.
Oh, could be. Yeah.
Health related. Thank you for the follow. Dritched. Thank you for the follow, Dritched. Woody says he doesn't recall Mountain Dew ever being in the UK.
Wouldn't surprise me.
It's banned
I'm
because
sure
of cancerous content.
Oh my God! Well, what soft drink doesn't cause cancer? I mean, come
on. Sprite. Sprite causes dysentery, not cancer.
Oh, all right. Fair enough. I wonder if there are any other lemon lime sodas in the UK.
Gary, TJump was the kid that pushed all the buttons on the fountain machine. Yeah, I have done that.
They call that a suicide, right? Or at least they do where I grew up.
No, I did it before they had names for it, so it was something I just combine all of them. Like, this is good. This is good. Let's try all of them. Oh, yes, disgusting. Oh my god. Jeremiah Rice, how tall are you, T-Jump? 6'2". I am 6'2".
What? Are you really?
Yep. Thank you for the follow.
You're 6'2", and you chose to do philosophy? Waste.
Can you dunk?
Can I dunk? No, I'm fat. Thank you for the follow. Shemishin. C. Shamanson. C. Shamanson. C. Monsin. C. Monsin? SIICMANSIIN. Bruce Wayne. What? I thought T-Jump lost weight. Did he gain it back? Yep, I gained it back. After I cured my depression, I was like, food is good.
Well, you was trying to build muscle mass at one point.
I was definitely lifting. That was back when I was losing weight. After I lost weight, I was trying to build muscle, but then I was like, I don't have depression anymore, so I don't care. No, give zero shites.
How's it going, T-Jump? Oh, sorry. My bad, buddy.
No, it's fine. I wasn't going to say anything important. So
I have something that might be a stupid question, but I was honestly just curious, T-Jump. Are you aware that Nathan Thompson was arrested?
Nope. For what?
Yeah, he was harassing kids on a playground.
Yeah, I knew that. That's old news. That's old.
Yeah, that's why I thought it might be stupid, but yeah, because I was trying to find. I believe it was his and Aaron Ra's debate as well as yours and his, and I was having trouble finding it. So I'm wondering if the algorithm
is this a flat Earth thing?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, but that was ages ago. That was like
just 2 years ago. Yeah, I was just wondering if you knew. Yeah.
You debated this. Never mind. I forgot you'll debate anyone who pays you. Sorry. Never mind.
Yeah, like he was yelling at the kids, trying to convert them to flat Earth, telling them the Earth was a lie, and he like crawled up on the fence, and was like throwing flyers over. It was pretty hilarious.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Like,
yeah, I mean, because I'm sure you know this already as a person who's debated flat Earth, you can't actually debate with them because it's not a view they hold in any with any measure of science or empiricism. It's a religious view.
You can debate them, but you just destroy them like T-Jump did. He just brings up radar, and Nathan can't say anything to it, and T-Jump's won the debate, hands down. Because his argument cannot be refuted, at least by Nathan.
No, but that's the thing, right?
T-Jump, debate more pseudoscience debates. I need somebody to set it up and find people to debate. Find me some pseudoscientists so I can debate. I have a flat Earth debate.
This point,
I think I have a flat Earth debate coming up.
I wouldn't be surprised if there were people who, at this point in YouTube's career, who would be motivated to set up fake debates with fake crazy people just to get the views.
I believe that's called politics.
Fair.
Hey, T-Jump. I missed most of that debate, so forgive me if you went over this during it. Do you think information is material or immaterial?
Material. It's literally a thing in physics.
Information?
Yep.
Is there an example you can give of physical information?
All of it. It's all physical. All information is physical. It's like literally just information theory. It's physical.
So it's like it's like an apple, an example of material information.
Well, sort of. It's more like all of the pieces of the apple. The quantum information that makes it up is information. Like apple isn't information. It's the quantum stuff that makes it up. That's the information. Efont, does sex therapy require monogamy? I guess that's between you and your spouse. I don't know. But I didn't find any attractive therapists, so that was not a thing for me.
T-jump is the definition of a Chad.
Chad jump. The chair is a Chad.
I think a lot of people, I could be wrong about this is my guess, but I think there's a lot of people who confuse information like what you were describing with information like semantic information, like telling somebody something they don't otherwise know, and then them getting that new information.
Yep. That's because they make a comparison between the abstract data that is conveyed through language and the abstract idea that the fact that it can be conveyed from one body to another body means that the information itself must be non-physical, because nothing physically is being transferred. But it's really just the shape. So like if you look at an object, your brain will actually form that shape in the visual cortex. So even though nothing was actually physically transferred, it was still physical information. Jeremiah Rice, what would your viewpoint be on nihilism? I'm not a nihilist. I think there's value and meaning and purpose and shit. I don't think nihilism is correct. I think the value and meaning and purpose is to build the best of all possible worlds where we can all be happy.
Yeah, and that's only possible through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Javier Jara, when you were in Hamzasden, Sorties insisted that you believe in philosophical naturalism. You corrected him. Last, he said, thank God, as if he corrected you. Why did they do that? Because they're dogmatic. That's why they did that. But yeah, I'm not a philosophical naturalist. I'm a methodological naturalist.
I think that was Sabor, not Sorties.
I do not recall, so I will trust you.
Yeah,
Nano, have you ever watched Raised by Wolves? Yes, that was a pretty good episode until a pretty good show right up until like the last episode. The last episode was garbage. The snake baby thing, that was dumb. Big flying snake baby.
Seems like a show I gotta watch.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and then they had the flying snake baby and fell through the core of the planet and then came out the other side and the snake baby flew off. Like, oh, that was so dumb. Like, no, why do you have to break all the laws of physics in one episode? Oh.
Who's your favorite actor to watch, Tom?
I don't have a favorite actor. I just have favorite shows. It's kind of like philosophers or music. Bands and actors do like one thing really, really well, and everything else is just garbage. So I really like Harry Potter. Really like Pirates of the Caribbean, Gladiator.
Cool.
I really like The Expanse, but I don't like any of the actors. I don't like any of the acting. I think they're all kind of cringe, but it's a really good story. Stargate SG-1, amazing show. David's, that's like Game of Thrones, good then garbage. Well, Game of Thrones was good for like 7 seasons, and then the last season was garbage. But Raised by Wolves, it was like literally just like the last episode, just the last episode. Everything just went to shit. I was like, what? Dye your hair for 10K, Jimmy G. Okay, I think that's. I don't know if that's enough. How much does it cost to dye your hair? What color? Thank you for the super chat, Jimmy G. Dye my hair. How much does it cost to dye your hair? How much does it cost to dye your hair? $50 to $70. That's nowhere close enough. But you'll pay as little as $35 at Supercuts. I can do Supercuts. I'm gonna get some Supercut dye. Baby lights, ombre highlights. I don't know what any of these words mean. So apparently I have to like bleach it first, then dye it blue or something. Moss Shekels, what channel are you reading questions from? I think I was in general. I don't know. I think it was in general. Pretty sure I was in general.
Hey, Tom, have you looked much into like the history of the pyramids and stuff like that? Like, is there a consensus among historians about like?
Yes, they were built by the Egyptians.
So you go with that explanation.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. No, I remember watching a documentary years ago. Is about an hour and a half long, 2 hours long. And it sort of goes into the facts about how it was built, and it just seems really improbable that the Egyptians had the kind of technology, or maybe they did, but obviously that technology we don't have today. So we can't even recreate the pyramid. It just seems like one of those feats that opens up for other conspiratorial kind of explanations. You know what I mean?
I mean, I've seen several documentaries on it. Like they showed how to do it. They literally just built a rock. They built one of the stones and showed you could move it with people. So they showed how they could physically do it. There's multiple different ways they could have physically done it. And then they did like a X-ray or something to show the ramps that were left inside or whatever. So they showed it's possible. Like none of the technology was impossible for them to do. It just took a lot of work.
Yeah, it's just like the degree of accuracy with it and how long it would have taken them. You know, the weight of each stone pointing to true north. You know, they measure it with lasers and everything is just accurately put together. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I don't think it was that amazing. Like they've been doing that for even the Romans and did that, and with like the pantheons. That's a pretty old thing. It wasn't hard, especially since most of them didn't have much other things to do with their time.
Yeah,
they were kind of obsessed with that, pointing it at the right stars and stuff. Javier Jera, will you dye your hair with J Dyer? I don't want it to be crap colored.
go for the chair color.
That's terrible. That's Jay Dyer is a great person. How dare you? How dare you?
Nope. Genius Tracks asks, what technology did they have?
What?
No, for Egyptians. Egyptians, they didn't go extinct. Like, he's asking what technology could they have had then that we don't have now? Why couldn't they have built it? Nothing spectacular.
Oh, nothing they had then that we can't replicate now, of course.
No, I think it was in the documentary I was watching. They had like architects there that would basically commenting about the accuracy of it, and they actually, I don't know if these were genuine architects, but in the documentary they were portrayed as such, and they were saying that they couldn't recreate it with the amount of accuracy that it has.
If you're making a documentary about how amazing ancient Egyptian architecture was, and you try to tap an architect to tell you, to give their opinion, and they say, I could easily have done that. They won't going to end up in your documentary, right? So like, just saying. I don't,
Yeah, there's all kinds of like conspiracies that sort of come off the back of it, like Fenerbahce's sequence, or was it the golden ratio, and
Fibonacci sequence?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And what's his name? The scientist Tesla, and sort of saying that.
Let's say it is the case that like pyramids can't be built today by anybody. What are we supposed to do about it? It's certainly not speculate they're built by aliens or anything like that. Not the appropriate response, obviously.
I don't know.
It's possible, but I think what gets me is that they say that the purpose of the pyramids were built for the pharaohs or kings of Egypt at that time, and it just seems that with all the accuracy and everything that it had, that it just seems there's more significance to it than just that.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I think that if there was like a structure, like if we discovered a structure 3,000 years old that was like the Burj Khalifa or something we can't build today, I think we could probably conclude that might be aliens. Like I think that's a rational thing to conclude. But obviously I think it's just a big pyramid, it's just a big triangle in the desert. Like it's not very impressive. I don't think there's anything spectacular about it. But like if we actually did discover a building that we couldn't build today, like a super indestructible massive tower of some kind, then yeah, I think maybe aliens could be a rational conclusion there.
You think so? I think you're setting yourself up for a possible like too easy to topple thing here, because like it's I'm not an expert on ancient buildings, but that an ancient civilization had some kind of technology that we just haven't rediscovered seems like a way more plausible explanation than aliens.
I don't think so. I don't think they could possibly have a technology to allow us to do something physically that we couldn't do with the current technology.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't have to be like technology in the sense of like a machine. It could just be a concept that we haven't rediscovered, a mathematical concept or
I don't think they could possibly have any kind of concept or technology that would allow them to build something that we can't physically build today.
I think that's overly dismissive personally, but yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think, like, what could they possibly...
I mean, even if it's unlikely, like even if you go and you say, it's unlikely that ancient civilizations would, like, super unlikely. I think it's less likely to go to aliens as a possible explanation for things that exist on Earth. It seems like the less likely explanation.
I don't think so. I don't like if they could build the Burj Khalifa 3,000 years ago. I don't think we'd conclude they just had lost technology. I think that'd be pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I agree. That specifically because it uses techniques that we know were discovered at a certain point in time. What I'm saying is, like, if we go back and say you're just exploring a Mayan ruin and you find something and you say, no known technology of the ancient Mayans could have produced this, and you say, well, the obvious explanation is there's an unknown technology of the Mayan civilization that could produce this, instead of just saying this is an alien artifact. You know what I mean? Like, that's a much more reasonable
unknown technology.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think that works that way, because I think that in order the technologies are built on other technologies, so to have an unknown technology would entail...
Well, it wasn't unknown to them, obviously. I mean, like, that would...
You can't just have an unknown technology. Like, steel is a combination of iron, which is a combination of ores, And so each new technology requires a new thing. Like in order to make steel, you have to heat iron. To heat iron requires you to build furnaces which can heat up to a certain degree, which they didn't have at a certain point. And to get steel, you have to heat it up to an even higher degree. There's no way you can just have like one single technology they missed that could just build super amazing structures.
Consider this: electroplating in the Western world didn't exist until the 20th century, I think, or the 18th, actually. Sorry. It wasn't a known thing, but in the Mesoamerican world, it was happening probably 3,000 years ago. So there was a time when that would have been an unknown technology to us.
Yeah, but the physical process could have been done by anybody. Like the actually making the building wasn't difficult. That's not something that we couldn't do with current technology. Like they might have done something we don't understand why they did it, like Stonehenge or something. Say there was some use for Stonehenge. We can still build Stonehenge today. If they literally made a structure we literally could not build, that would imply that they have some superior race. Unless, like, if there was an entire civilization that was that way, then yeah, we could just say, yeah, okay, it was just a super advanced tech culture. But if there's a single building, that was super advanced, surrounded by just regular people, then be like, probably aliens.
I mean, the pyramids of Giza definitely like fascinate me. I mean, I know you don't find them as fascinating, but I think because it's supposed to have said to be an 8-sided pyramid rather than just a 4-sided one. It's supposed to be earthquake proof. Supposed to point to true north within a ridiculous amount of accuracy, and for them to build such a structure with all those blocks of stones, it just seems like it's a lot more significant use than what the consensus of historians are saying.
I don't know what you mean. Like, it seems just like I don't see anything significant. They just spent a lot of time moving a whole lot of rocks. And they did, I mean, obviously they can do the mathematical calculations back then, but I don't see that as significant to like point it towards north or whatever. The Orion's belt. Mr. Boss, yes, except $50 for debates. It's close. 47 would be close enough. Close enough.
As I say, there's conspiracies out there that they're used for like some sort of battery power or some sort of energy, harnessing energy, or was used at a time. And I don't believe those, but obviously there's all kinds of possibilities with these amazing structures.
I don't think that's physically possible, not with limestone. Limestone can't store charges like that.
You can't?
No.
Okay.
It's a rock. All right, guys, I'm going to get off, get some food. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Thanks for showing up for this show. Questions, super chats. See you guys later.